I would like to strike something down here at the beginning of the show, because I think it goes in line with something that I actually agreed with Kevin Stefanski saying over the last 48 hours about Shedeur. And I know that there's a big conversation about you gotta cut him loose, you gotta let him air it out, and all these different ideas here. And I think Kevin said something that I do think we should actually pay attention to, which is he just needs reps right now. And so while everyone's focused on what the situations that you're putting Shador in, and these are the things we should be focusing on, by the way. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to you got to open up the game plan for Shador, I think there's people still clinging to the belief that if he starts the final 5 games and obviously the 2 previous games, that we're going to have some sort of rubber-stamped guarantee Shador is or is not a starting quarterback at the end of those 7 games. And I just want to remind everybody that while we can get a lot of glimpses into what he might be, every year, there's 2 or 3 guys that were drafted in the first round that we don't know about until 4 or 5 years later. Now, Shedor's not going to get that bandwidth, right? But in terms of we have to have a firm answer on Shedeur by the end of the season, guys, you're making up a goalpost that doesn't likely exist.
Look at the conversation today nationally was all around Dak Prescott and what a slow cook that has been. People right now are just coming to the realization that he's having one of the best seasons out of any quarterback in the NFL this year. But it's like, oh, he looks different than he did a couple years ago. And wait, he went through Jason Garrett to then go through Mike McCarthy to now have a Schottenheimer as the head coach, and he's still winning games. And it's like, I didn't know he could do all this. It's been a million years since Dak Prescott was taken. Like, some guys are a little bit more of a slow burn. That's the reality.
Well, and I know they're drafted about 3 rounds apart. I look at this like Jalen Hurts in 2020 with the Eagles, where they gave him, I believe, the final 4 or 5 games of that season. And there was nothing in that 5-game stretch that absolutely said, this is the guy. There was also nothing that said, definitively, he wasn't the guy. You're looking for enough. Like this myth of, I need a firm answer on Shedeur, and same thing with Dylan Gabriel, although it's a little different with Dylan because he's just a whittle guy, and he doesn't have a lot of the physical traits you're looking for. That's a quicker answer than Shedeur, who's learning the mental side of the game, or maybe speeding up the mental side of the game while matching it with his physical ability. You're not looking for the absolute yes or no. If anything, you'll get an absolute no in 7 games and a 5th-round pick, but an absolute yes, that's no. You're looking for enough.
Oh, I mean, I think
you see enough growth to say, I think with a full offseason, this guy can be good enough next year?
I think for a lot of people, you can get a definite no. I think it'll be unfair. We can discuss that, obviously. But I think there's enough people out there that if he stinks up the joint for the next 5 games, it's like, all right, that's a definite no. Way more than we'll find after 6 or 7 games where people are like, he definitively is the guy. Yeah. And we've seen some guys take over and late in the season the way that he's doing, and they capture it and they run with it. I'm thinking Brock Purdy. He was the 3rd quarterback off it was Trey Lance who got injured, then into Jimmy Garoppolo for a few games, and then it got to Brock Purdy, and then Brock Purdy never relented, never gave up. And at the end of the season, San Francisco knew what they were doing in that situation. I think ultimately it's going to end up being we go into draft conversations where there's just enough people that think we need to give Shedeur another year, and there's also just enough people that are going to throw numbers at you and throw all sorts of other things to say, this isn't the case, this isn't the guy.
But that's most likely where we should be. To me, that's an encouraging sign. If Shedeur can go from 5th-round pick, 2nd guy in that room that they drafted, the guy who we're going to redshirt up until, they believe that until 3 weeks ago, if you can go from that to it's a justifiable conversation, that is the win you're looking for, Browns fans. Like this idea that because I agree with what you said, and to me it's a numbers thing. Most oftentimes when you're talking about a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round, 7th round quarterback, 5-6 games is enough because there's not the talent there. You're looking if they have all the other stuff they might have. Mm-hmm. Even then, the averages say 80% of those guys within the first 7 games are, oh, you're a backup, or oh, you're this, or oh, you're that. And then maybe they hang around long enough to dispel that at a different time in a different place. That's what the law of averages says with this. So, like, everybody wanting, like, oh, if we just get 5 more games of Shedeur, like, that's what I want. I don't want to see Dylan go back out there. I don't need to see Deshaun. I don't need to see Bailey Zappi. But what we should be looking for, the final 5 games of this season, as an extension of the last 2 starts, is enough. and that is going to be subjective, and I know that's going to lead to fights, which is really what you're talking about. Totally get it.
We're going to have a lot of them.
But that's as good as it's going to get. Or at least that should be the expectation right here with 5 games to go.
You got 5 games, and if I were to tell Shedeur Sanders before the season got underway, you are that buried on the depth chart, and you're going to have 7 games to go ahead and prove your worth as a 5th rounder, he'd sign up for it on the dotted line. Like Shedeur, you can't ask for much more. And I get it; it's later on in the season, not the most ideal time. Weather conditions. Guess what? Our road games this year for the remainder of the season is Chicago, which are a lot like Cleveland weather, and Cincinnati, which is a lot like Cleveland weather. Get used to it. You're not going to have a nice weather game the rest of the time. It's going to be tough. This isn't what Dylan Gabriel had, where it was Chamber of Commerce weather and everything was awesome. You're going to have to overcome these odds, but this is part of your story. You got 7 games. If you do get to play this out for the rest of the year, you really can't ask for much more if you're Shedeur.
I think he's showing some signs that perhaps maybe he actually can be a winning quarterback in the NFL. And the things that I see that make me believe this, and why I think the Browns probably believe this to a certain extent, is the fact that he does sort of have that it factor. He's got a nice, strong arm. He's got the ability to evade the rush. He's showing some things. He's got elite accuracy, a really nice touch on the ball. I think what makes this evaluation difficult is that the offense is horrible, and he deserves a chance to keep going. I like the 1 week at a time thing. I like that because it keeps him hungry. He has a way of feeling like he has arrived after he wins a game, whether it be preseason or regular season, and he doesn't need to be feeling like he's arrived yet. He needs to stay hungry and just keep working at this.
Mary Kay Cabot, Cleveland.com, on earlier today on this very station, giving her take on Shedeur. And I think a lot of what I heard from Mary Kay there, to me, is where we should be with Shedeur. The only thing I would push back on is listen, I think if you can evaluate somebody in the worst circumstances and they can continue to have growth in a little bit of success, a little bit more success than the last week, a little bit more pocket presence than the last week, then you can really start to say, man, if we got a left tackle, a wide receiver in here and rebuilt the rest of the offensive line, and the kid had a full offseason, we might really have something next year. Like that gets back to the idea of, she's right that, surrounding him is not really anything of note other than Quinshawn and maybe 1 or 2 offensive linemen. And the one that played the best this year is the guy that won't be playing this last week and was splitting reps with Tevin Jenkins this week. Totally makes sense of it. All of this makes sense. However, I look at this and go, yeah, there's a lot that you said that's right. You're not looking for definitive yes or no. You're looking for, is there enough in that cup that we can actually get more out of it going forward with a better, improved situation around him? Yeah,
and I know I said in the offseason we'll probably have a spot where half the fan base thinks no, half the fan base thinks yes, and we'll be discussing it, and then we'll be putting it into buckets of like, well, is that better than whoever you could take in the first round, or is that better than Mac Jones, or whatever that ends up being? But really, sometimes this stuff does become really crystallized and really clear. Like I mentioned Brock Purdy last segment, but yeah, I think even Drake May, he's at the forefront of everyone's mind today. Drake May is a perfect example. After year one, the Patriots didn't have anything in year one around Drake May, but they knew just based off of watching. It didn't matter about the stats. They just knew watching that he was developing each week and he was getting better each week and he was becoming the quarterback that they thought could blossom into what he is now in year 2. And that's really what you're trying to sell at the end of this. Are you getting better? And do you feel like if we put the other pieces around you, we would see a blossom? And for Drake May, it's happened.
Well, and let's not forget that I don't know, even though Shedeur can do some of the stuff that Kevin Stefanski likes, because I think there's a push and pull that I don't think Kevin loves a lot of off-script quarterback action. I think Kevin likes this is your first read, this is your second read, this is your third read, do as I say, and you'll prosper.
Right.
There are other head coaches who are going to look at Shedeur's ability to go off-script and see that you can win with that. And basically keep coaching him to play within the pocket while not discouraging him from playing off script. And so, not only do I think, gosh, if this kid keeps growing in this environment, and he's got a full off season, and he's got a new offensive line, and he's got a new number one wide receiver, right? Not only do I think that can help, I think if there's a move with Kevin Stefanski and you bring in a offensive coordinator who is not as beholden to his script, but maybe more akin to what Bill O'Brien did with Deshaun Watson. This is not a 1-for-1, by the way. But my point is, if you look at what Bill O'Brien did in Penn State, at New England, he didn't do anything similar to what he did with Deshaun Watson. Bill O'Brien built an offense to suit Deshaun Watson.
Right.
That's what you could possibly be looking at if over the next 5 games, again, you just see growth and maturity. And again, maturity, I'm not talking about emotional maturity. We're talking about on-field maturity.
That takes a different Stefanski. And listen, I don't know.
No, we agree.
And I don't know what to make of this last week's game. We obviously talked a lot about the running element of it all and what they did in the second half of that game. But it was a weather game, and so I don't know. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, and because I didn't think they shackled Shedeur or did anything like that in the Raiders game. I really didn't. But was that just because it was perfect conditions, or because what we're seeing? I mentioned again first segment, you're going to have bad weather games the rest of the way. So are you in a bad weather game? Does Stefanski just go back to what he had been doing with Dillon and with all these other quarterbacks?
I think we have to throw the book out on Stefanski previously to what we're seeing with Shador right now. Because I think he's flying by the seat of his pants. I think he's playing a quarterback that maybe he's been coerced into playing. I think he's playing a quarterback that he doesn't, it's not like, but he doesn't believe in the same way that he believes in Dylan Gabriel, the supercomputer. And so I don't know that Kevin, I don't know. I just think the situation has run its course. I think it would make a lot of sense that a revitalized head coach, a coach that has the right energy, has the right mindset, that isn't just, I like Dylan better. I think a different coach would just get a different result and maybe treat Shedeur a little differently and talk in terms of in-game stuff.
No, so I listen, I agree with you, but that's the part that makes me so agitated when I think about Stefanski, because you would think most people that are true masters of their craft or people that really love what they do, they'd look at this and listen, this might sound insulting, I don't mean it to be in any sort of way, but they'd look at the situation right now.
An ego? Don't say he's got an ego.
No. I'd say he'd love the challenge.
Can't say that.
I'd say he'd love the challenge of it all. Of all right, Dylan was my quarterback. I thought he fit into my system, and I thought this would work really, really well. It didn't, but here is this new set of clay that I get to mold, and I get to try to figure out what he does best and how we can get this offense to fly and work the same way that all these other coaches across the league. They get a new quarterback, and they're like, all right, let's see what Sam Darnold to Minnesota. KOC is like, all right, let's figure this out. Let's see what we can do here. And I just feel like Stefanski doesn't. Stefanski knows what he wants, and then he tries to fit these quarterbacks. He did this even with Deshaun for the first 2 years.
He did it with Baker, too.
He tries to fit them into what he wants to do and what he thinks he does best, instead of being like, oh, this is exciting. This quarterback does this, and I get to play to their strengths. I get to play to what they do best, and I'm going to be able to figure this out. It's almost like he's a one-trick pony in this whole thing, and it's so bothersome to me.
Well, and I think you're right. And here's... I think we can take how he was trying to use Baker. And I know half that sample size is tough because Baker was hurt. I understand that. And that's, for a lot of people, they're just not going to move past that in the conversation. Even in 2020, he took Baker and said, all right, you're going to do these 3 things. We're going to run the hell out of the ball. And then that's it. That's going to be our offense. And so a lot of people looked at Baker and said, oh, he can't do it. He's just a system quarterback, or nothing more than a game managing quarterback, right?
And it was fine in the moment in some respect, because you looked at it and said, well, he's handing the ball off to Nick Chubb.
And also you were trying to build from the beginning.
You had what at the time was one of the top 3 offensive lines in the sport, and you had Nick Chubb as your running back. So I think a lot of us were like, okay, let's see where this goes.
And you're also, in fairness, you're also trying to have the basic foundation of Baker Mayfield as an NFL quarterback. Well, what happened? It's the same thing what we saw with Joe Flacco, his wings were clipped earlier this season. I don't know that Dylan Gabriel has anything more. Dylan Gabriel's wings have been clipped. Shedeur a little bit has been clipped. Well, what happened when Baker wasn't clipped anymore? What happened when Baker went to 3 straight offensive coordinators who all they did was say, hey, what do you like to do and what are you most comfortable in? The guy went and played his 3 best seasons in the NFL. I don't think it's coincidence. At some point, that has to be a reflection on Stefanski that 3 different offensive coordinators have gotten a different level of Baker than Stefanski ever did here in Cleveland.
I mean, it's why I believe Jim Harbaugh has been successful everywhere he's been. Stanford, San Francisco, Michigan, and then now with the Chargers. His big motto in life is coach to the people. coach to what they do. Every person's got their own stories. Every person's got their own way of playing. The fun part about coaching is finding out what they do best and then playing to that strength. I feel like the people that do that are always successful. Meanwhile, the coaches like Stefanski that just try to fit what they do best and make everyone else work around that, it's just a recipe for disaster.